Okay, so I want to go over 6.5 real quick. The operations with radicals. But the first lesson I want to look at is to distinguish between the root symbol, the radical symbol, and turning it into a exponent. Okay, so first lesson is if I have the radical of x, which is really the square root of x, that's the same thing as writing as x to the 1/2. If I have the third root of x, or the third radical of x, equal to x to the 1/3. So you can see the pattern here. So if I do the fourth root of x, that's equal to x to the 1/4. So whatever my radical is, the exponent in front of the radical, n, which it could be any number, is equivalent to x to the 1/n. Okay, so using that, because you'll see that later on when we start to do multiplication and division and subtraction, you see how it could be easy to go back and forth to make it understandable. Okay, so from here we're going to go ahead and continue with our lesson real quick. If I let, in the example problem in 6.5, the very first one, if I let f of x equal to 3 square root of x and g of x equal to negative square root of x, what is f plus g of x? So what that means is I'm adding f of x to g of x. So f of x is 3 square root of x plus negative 10 square root of x. Since that's a negative sign here, it's really saying 3 square root of x minus 10 square root of x. So 3 minus 10 is negative 7. The square root of x remains the way it is. Okay? And so from there on, if I want to evaluate it, let's say, what is f plus g instead of x? Now I replace x with 4. This is saying negative 7 square root of x, but 4 instead. We're going to take the positive root of this, so the square root of 4 is 2. And that gives me negative 14. So that's how they get negative 14 to the problem there. Okay? Alright, moving on. So you can see if I was doing subtraction in the second solution, it pretty much is the same thing, but like I did with addition, so I'm not going to go over that. What I want to go over is example 3, multiplying two functions. So if f of x is equal to x squared and g of x is equal to x squared, g of x is equal to the square root of x, what is f g of x? Okay, so when you see them together like this, f g of x, or you see it as f of x, this is or, times g of x, okay, then I'm basically just multiplying these two functions together, x squared times the square root of x. Now this is where that first lesson comes in. How do I multiply two different formats? This is exponent, this is radical. Remember that the radical can be expressed as an exponent, so this is times x to the 1/2 power. Anytime I see a radical by itself with no exponent in the front, then it's just to the 1/2. These are the same base, x and x, so what happens is I add the exponents together, and therefore this is x to the x to the 2 1/2, right? Remember adding like compound numbers together, which is basically a whole number to a fraction. And if I were to change this one more time, to change it to an improper fraction, this is x to the 5/2. So that's the first part of my answer. The next part is if x were to equal to, I believe, 9 in this problem, okay, So then this would become 9 to the 5 halves. Now, how do we evaluate that? Remember that we can change this back to 9, and the 2 on the bottom becomes the radical or symbol, and then surrounding the whole problem, I raise it to the 5th power. Okay? So dividing by 2 is really saying the square root or the radical of 9. The 5 on top is really raising the whole problem to the 5th power. So we know the square root of 9. That is going to be 3, and then we're going to raise it to the 5th power. And I believe if you look at the example problem, 3 to the 5th power is 243. Okay? So that is your example with example number 3. Okay, so now what if we were to divide? Okay, if we divide over here, given if f of x is 6x and g of x is x to the 3/4, what is f divided by g of x going to be? Well, that means exactly what it means. F divided by g, I take 6x and divide it by x to the 3/4. Now, you may not see an exponent there, but remember, if it's just an x by itself with no exponent showing, that's really a 1 right there. Okay? So this guy is really turning into that guy. And so I have the same base. So 6 divided by 1 right here is still 6. I still have my x, but now the exponent we subtract instead of add like we did in the multiplication part. So this becomes 6x to the 1 minus 3/4. This is 1/4 power. Okay, that's what that format looks like. Now we evaluate it when x equals to 16. So what is that? So that means 6 times 16 to the 1/4 power. So this is f divided by g of x equal to 6 times this. So that's what that equals to. So again, how do we take the 16 to the 1/4 power first? Okay, I'm going to write the 6 because we're not going to deal with that just yet. Remember that this is really saying the 4th root of 16. So the 4th root of 16 is going to be 2. So 6 times 2, which gives me 12, and that's my answer there. So hopefully that helps you out with 6.5. Video will be up for 7.2 later on today, but that should be a little bit simpler to work with. And I gave you the natural number e, and I gave you Desmos as a way to graph your functions and see how they relate to the answer. Okay, so hopefully this guys helps you out.